What's good, y'all? Welcome to another Anything by Mansa Cannon. I'm Mansa. Today, I'm really excited to have on one of my classmates from Sea Change. What's Sea Change? You've had a couple of my former classmates in here, and I'll remind you, it is one of the Chamber's great leadership development programs, allows us to do group activities that will impact the city of Cincinnati. And this woman that I have on today is an engineer. She's a leader in her industry and has done an amazing job throughout our state and throughout a couple others. For that reason, I had to bring her on so you all can learn a little bit more about what a civil engineer does. What does it actually mean to be in infrastructure and working for the county and in the public sector? Let's actually dive deeper into this so you can see whether or not you want to do her job or not. With that being said, let's get straight to it. No further ado, this is Miss Laura, and I'm so excited to have you on. Thank you, Laura, for being on.
Mario, thank you so much for having me. What a great introduction. Oh my gosh. To make everybody want to be an engineer, so that's great.
Absolutely. Before I get started, I have to ask the first question, which allows me to be able to interview, which is, do you like your job?
I don't like my job. I love my job. I love being an engineer. You know, it wasn't what I thought that I would be when I was a little girl, but I have really settled in where I need to be. So yes, I love my job.
Okay, perfect. That's the number one requirement. Before we go ahead and get to the present, let's make sure we're flashing back to the past, as everyone knows I love to do. What is that first job you remember wanting to have as a youth? And it can be ridiculous.
Okay, well, lucky for you, this is ridiculous. So I remember as a young girl, during Christmas time, I know you recognize outside the grocery stores the Salvation Army bell ringers. I remember as a young girl seeing them for the first time and thinking, that is what I want to do. I thought they got to keep the money in the bin. They got to talk to people. They got to ring the bell. I thought that would just be amazing. So it did not turn out that way. My kids and I do volunteer every Christmas with the Salvation Army, but no, my first job aspiration was I wanted to be a doctor, pediatrician in particular. So that's I held on to that and left for college with that aspiration. So.
Okay. Well, I say this, it isn't that ridiculous because I actually have a family member who told me that when he retires, all he really wants to do and he's really excited to do is go work at Walmart as a greeter. He's like, I want to be a greeter. It just looks so cool. I want to be the guy when everyone's walking in, the old guy, like, hey, how's it going? Have a great day. He's like, that's something I want to do. So, I mean, you're just outside in the cold. So it's not that far off. It's just colder.
Meeting people and talking to people, right?
Yeah.
Spreading the love. So
what changed? You said you wanted to be a pediatrician. Was the profession that you decided on outside of being the bell ringer for the Salvation Army? So what changed with that?
Well, we being honest with each other. My grades. So I got to college and took the first pre-med level biology class, and it wasn't a match. So I had to quickly kind of shift gears and figure out what it was that I wanted to do. So that was a big decision to make because it was something I was really holding on to, but it just wasn't in the stars.
I guess I'm a tad bit confused because you're an engineer, so I can't fathom an engineer's mind having something be too complicated without them figuring it out. Like, that's kind of the whole thing with you all. Although I do question, since you said it was your first class, because I think I told this before, on my first test, I had been doing 2-a-days. I had woke up around 5:30 to run at 6, lift at 7, went to my first college test, which was like a stats test. I was exhausted. I was running like 4 hours of sleep. And college student, I mean, yeah, you don't go to sleep early and within a reasonable amount of time. And I took a monster and I panicked on that test. I'm like, I'm gonna fail. I'm not gonna make the team. I'm gonna be a failure in life. And I just like, I can't do this. And I think I dropped that class because I knew I was gonna fail that class. But I came back and I passed the class later on. But after that first test, I was like, yeah, this isn't gonna set the right tone for this year. So we're gonna just run that back.
Right? I mean, like for college, you're leaving home. I left home and I lived on campus, and everything's an adjustment, but I have never been great at I do love to read, but if I am having to read something that I don't really want to read at the moment, I can read for an hour and not remember anything that I just read. But you can give me a math formula, and it's always been this way. You can give me a math formula or put a geometry problem in front of me, and I could solve them all day. So it really is just kind of think the way I'm wired. I do much better with hands-on kind of activities, problem solving. For me, biology was a lot of reading and memorization in the beginning, and that's just not my strength. So
your strength is actually working through something opposed to having a formula in a way to do it and it's static and it's this way every time. You can be a little bit more creative and work it out on your own.
Yep. Yep. And that, to me, that's really what an engineering degree is a degree in problem solving. You could be, any discipline in engineering, I would argue, and you come out with a great set of tools to work through any problem. So you might not know every equation or you might not know every formula, but you've created this way of thinking in your brain that allows you to work through problems. Yeah. So I think it's a great education.
That's intriguing because I definitely recognize when I came out of college, mind you, I'm a Clevelander. I didn't really know that much about this city, all the Fortune 500 companies that are here. So I barely knew what P&G was, but it's been really intriguing as an adult after I graduated college, hearing so many people go to P&G and hearing that one of the number one things that P&G loved was engineers. And it was like engineers would get put in project manager positions. And it's like, I thought an engineer did this or did that. And come to find out, they were getting hired because of the way they think. And the famous P&G test, which is probably more biased towards the engineers, which frustrates the heck out of me. And I never took the test, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I just always was deterred because I'm like, I hate those type of tests, and you're not gonna tell me I'm not qualified just because I didn't pass your test. Give me a chance and I could have did it. But I just didn't even try, which is not the best message here. But hey, people tell their own truth, and that was mine.
P&G is a great example of that. They hire a tremendous number of engineers. Back in the early 80s, a lot of people don't know, Procter & Gamble was one of the highest employers in Cincinnati of civil engineers, which if you think about Procter & Gamble, you don't think of civil engineering. You think of chemical, manufacturing, industrial, but they really, their business model is based on innovation, and you need that kind of thought process. People that can think outside of the box and be given a problem and work towards that solution. So yeah, it's a great example of that type of mindset.
So can you break down what exactly a civil engineer is? Because many times people hear about engineers, they think about people who build planes, building rockets, you have people who build buildings and things like that. So what is a civil engineer?
Well, there are all different kinds of civil engineers, and you can specialize at the collegiate level and what type of civil engineering you want to do, or you can get just a general civil engineering degree. That's the route I took for my bachelor's degree. I got a general civil engineering degree. Anything basically that the public uses, a civil engineer touches. So we work a lot with asphalt and concrete. Civil engineers design all your storm sewers, all your sanitary sewers. We design bridges, we design roads, airports. We do the structural analysis on buildings. So the architect comes up with the really pretty concept, and then the civil engineer brings it to life. So any sort of public infrastructure that the public is using, civil engineers touch.
Okay. So that's a question that I don't want to answer to yet. I don't want to answer to this question yet because I'm going to bring it up later.
Okay.
But I do want to know if you're able to answer this question. And that question is, do you understand what took place in New York when that flood happened throughout the city and the streets? I don't know if you've seen it, but the subways and everything were pretty much just flooded with water, and it was crazy. And it looked like it came out of the sewers. So is that something that you would be trained to actually understand?
Yes. Can I tell you a little story about something I saw today?
Uh-oh.
So it's funny you would bring that up because I'm actually running late and my hair is usually a lot bigger and more styled, but I was out in the rain right before it came. I walked out of work, and in northern Kentucky, where I work, we have what's called a combined sewer. So back in the olden days when they were still laying brick sewers, they were combined. So they carried sanitary and storm together. Well, there's a combined sewer that runs right outside my office, and it rained so heavily. The pressure from the sewer line was literally causing the manhole lid to fly up into the air like 4 feet. And it was like a geyser of water coming out. I've never seen anything like it before. The sewer was so full that just the pressure from that fluid in the line just, it was kind of amazing. Of course, I had to stand out there. I called the police to come and provide traffic control. I didn't want somebody to get hurt, but of course, I had to stand out there and just like marvel at it.
Okay, well, later on, I'll bring up that question and ask
Okay.
what is actually taking place in that situation. But right now, let's go ahead and go through your actual degrees. I know you have your master's as well. And let's also discuss once you went into your professional career. So let's talk about college, becoming a civil engineering and switching out of the pediatrician.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Sure. So, once I decided medicine wasn't the right path for me, I knew that I needed something science-based and technical. That's really where my strength was. And so I started to look at where my skill sets were. What was I good at? What are things that I enjoy doing? What would I enjoy studying? I didn't want to be miserable while I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
So I ultimately ended up math. I was on the math team in high school, and math has always been a strong suit for me, math and physics. And so that's really what led me towards engineering. Now, when you get to engineering, there's all different types of engineering. And what led me to civil was I really enjoyed building things. I always loved using Legos. I love being outside. I love being part of the environment that I'm in. And I love helping people. And that's really what pushed me towards civil engineering, since it is all public infrastructure that we affect. Mm-hmm. Being able to have that touch point with the public was really what pushed me towards civil engineering.
How did you discover it?
Well, it took a lot of work. So I asked a lot of questions. And I'll be honest, my parents helped me. When we knew that I was going to make a shift in college, they really encouraged me to get out and talk to people that were out in the workforce. And ask them questions on what they did, whether they liked what they were doing, exactly what you're doing right now. And that's what I did. I just started reaching out to family, friends, asking questions. When you go to college and you're learning about something, oftentimes it can be different than what you're actually practicing once you're out in the field. And so I really wanted to get that real life perspective on what I was doing once I got out of college. And it helped tremendously.
Say that again?
And that helped tremendously.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's interesting because that's also a part of the concept behind anything. And it's the fact that expansion happens after exposure. And you were talking about how you were exposed to different people and connections that had these different roles and allowed you to be able to answer and ask them the questions that you want to find out the answers to. And also the fact that many times people grow up to do things that they see other people doing, especially their parents' friends. And so to hear your story and how the actual niche of people that you were surrounded by allowed you to end up in your profession. And that's why this exists, because not everyone's going to be exposed to someone who's going to actually have the skill sets and the profession that matches their skill sets. And so they may not learn about being a civil engineer.
And keep in mind too, Mario, back when I was in college, that was over 20 years ago now. There were not very many women in engineering at all. I would walk into a lecture hall of 100 students and maybe 3 or 4 women. So it was a very transformative time for women in the field back in the late 90s. We were really starting to see more women in the engineering programs. Civil engineering is a heavy construction program. So there's a lot of construction methodology classes and things like that. So it was predominantly male at the time. I think now when you go into a typical civil engineering classroom, you'll see much, much closer to 50-50 numbers. So that was almost something that intrigued me about the profession even more, was to be able to step in and prove, that women have a place here, and this is, we can charge this career path just as well as men can. So it was a great time to be part of the education program.
Absolutely. I understand that because I worked in more of when I went to college, I got my degree in psychology, never knowing that was like a very popular major for women, and all the courses are oftentimes filled with the opposite sex. So I understand being in
Yeah.
courses that are primarily of the opposite gender. Let's talk about college. What was your college experience like? I know that you were an engineer, and frankly, engineers just like myself who got his degree in psychology, our courses tend to be the opposite of our genders. So what was that experience like? I know you switched degrees, so go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, the experience was great. I switched the degree early enough on that it didn't make, too big of a difference for me as far as time frame goes. I loved where I went to school. I went to my in-state state university. There were two engineering programs in Kentucky at the time. One was in my hometown of Louisville, and the other was in Lexington, and I wanted to get away from home, so I chose Lexington. But I had a great experience. Everybody in engineering was very welcoming. It was a very close-knit group of students. Because you are taking all of your classes together and they are difficult, you form a lot of study groups. Since there weren't very many women, I did join a sorority on campus, and I was extremely involved with that. And so that was a great way to kind of make some other connections outside of engineering, and stay involved around campus. So I loved my college experience. It was great.
Okay. Was there any particular classes that you remember taking in college that really plays a role in your current profession?
If we're being honest, the class that I took that plays the most role in my profession as it stands today is my engineering communications class. So much of what I do right now is communicate with contractors and designers. And that is not a big part of the engineering curriculum, but it's really what I do the most of right now. So that's changed over the years, right? As your career ebbs and flows, you're doing different things. But for me, that's where it's at right now.
Okay. You graduate college. That was 4 years, it sounds like.
It was. I actually did a joint program. I joined a program while I was in college that allowed me to begin working on my master's degree before I had my bachelor's degree. So that cut out some time. It took me 4.5 years to get my undergrad degree, but then only an extra semester to get my master's degree. Okay. So 5 years in total for the both.
Based off of all the work you were doing, it doesn't sound like it, but I'm going to ask anyways. Did you have any internships in college or co-op programs that you participated in?
I did not do any college-sponsored co-ops, but I did start working for an engineering firm in my hometown the summer after my sophomore year. So I really wanted to get some of that real work experience on my resume before I graduated. And so I did that on my own outside of the co-op program. They did have a co-op program. At the time, it wasn't as robust as it is now. But yeah, I did that all on my own.
What was it that you were doing when you were a sophomore?
The truth, I was a plan runner. So this was back before, the internet was strong enough. We still had dial-up connections, so you can send plan sets through email or anything like that. So I literally would run drawings between our engineering office and the Metropolitan Sewer District. So this engineering firm that I was working for did a lot of sewer work. They would finish a design set that needed review. They'd roll it up, tell me where to bring it, and I would literally just walk to wherever it was that it needed to go. And in return, they would let me sit in on design reviews. They taught me what they were designing as they went. And so I really learned a lot about the industry while I was there. I worked there a couple summers, and every summer I was progressively able to do more and more. So by my last summer, I was doing stormwater design on the plan sheets. So no more running the plans back and forth.
Sounds phenomenal, because as a person who came from the social work field into construction, I can absolutely acknowledge the fact that there is different terminologies. You're walking into a culture that's different. The energy, the way you interact, everything is so much different from what I'm accustomed to. So I can only imagine being able to graduate school and already have that learning curve where you don't have to go in and learn this. Frankly, different professions have different languages. Doctors have their own language. Engineers have their own language. So to go into that field and having had that experience, seems like you came in probably running, just like, all right, let's do this. I know exactly how to handle this. I've been doing it for years.
Yep. And not only that, it gave me the ability to just interact with other folks within the industry. So people in the public sector, not just at the firm I was working with, I was able to work with them. They would send me out on construction inspections by the end. So I learned how to communicate with folks in the field, how to look at things that were on a plan set and actually watch them be built while they were being built. So it was a great experience. And I did it. And it's, you have to be creative with how you find these things, right? You can't wait for things just to come into your lap. I literally opened up the yellow pages and found engineering firms and just picked up the phone, and somebody said yes and had me in for an interview. And that led to 3 summers of great work.
Did you get paid?
I did get paid. Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
I got paid. I think I got paid like $10 an hour, which back then was big money. So
Yes.
and honestly, to this day, I still work with some of the folks that I worked with there, just through, different, I see them at different organizational meetings. When I was with our state government, I worked with some of them on projects. So just to be able to build that network is huge.
Okay. So you graduate, you have work experience already.
Mm-hmm.
You have the degree.
Yeah.
What's the next move? I know you said you had that second degree as well. So was there an immediate extra year that you had to do after you got your bachelor's, or what was the next process?
Well, like I said, I was in an accelerated program at UK to get both those degrees. So I went straight from one to the next. When I finished, I had both degrees in hand. Quite honestly, I was hoping to continue on with my PhD. I had a huge love of the university and teaching, but life had other plans and I didn't end up going that route. I ended up getting married while I was in graduate school. And so my husband had received a job with Procter & Gamble here in Cincinnati. And it was a great opportunity for him. And so we actually relocated to North Carolina as part of his job there. So I wasn't able to continue on with my co-op company. I had to kind of start over in a new state with new regulations and everything else. So
I could see that. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah, but it was great. It was a great experience. So
can you actually say exactly what the degrees were that you
Sure.
graduated?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering, and then I also have a Master's of Science in Civil Engineering.
Okay.
And one thing a lot of people don't understand is, particularly with civil engineering, you have to have a professional engineer's license to practice once you're out of college. So it's not like you can just finish college and go be an engineer. You have to put in some continuing ed. You have to take a couple of exams. You have to have professional references that can vouch for you. So that's a process in itself that you have to start, right when you get out of college.
When you say professional references, are you saying that somebody from a job that you work as an intern has to be able to go out on the limb, or can one of your professors do it as well because they've seen you in class?
So it starts with what is called the Fundamentals of Engineering exam. And you take that when you graduate engineering school. I think it's about a 4-hour exam. It's strictly knowledge-based. So it's a multiple choice exam. Once you pass that is when your clock starts towards getting your professional engineer's license. So if you have a bachelor's degree, it is 4 years of experience before you can take your professional engineer's exam. If you have a master's degree, it's 3 years of experience. They allow your 1 year of master's degree to count towards your experience. So in that time frame between passing your fundamentals exam and taking your professional engineer's exam, that's when you gather those personal references. So the board will actually check with them to make sure you were actually doing engineering work. They'll ask for examples of your engineering work, things like that.
How difficult is that process?
It's not too difficult. I mean, to get the professional references is not difficult at all because you have a job and you're doing that type of work. The exam itself is pretty difficult. A lot of people kind of equate it to like the bar exam for attorneys. It's a very comprehensive 8-hour exam. The first half is multiple choice and the second half is all written answer. So it can be difficult, especially if you think about, once you're three years out of graduate school, you have, other things going on in your life. So finding that time to study and balance everything, it was difficult, but.
Like you said, 8 hours.
Yes. Yeah. It's mentally exhausting by the time you're done.
What's
Yeah.
the major difference that you're learning and studying for to be able to state on a test that you may have gotten from college? Like, is it something different? Is it just following up, doubling down? Is it that you're being tested on in particular?
So it's a lot of what you learned in college. Once you get out into the field, you take highway design as an example. When you're in college and you're taking your highway design class, you're using all the formulas to create the right radiuses for the roadways, all the right curvatures, things like that. You're doing all of that by hand. Once you get out into the workforce, you're using CAD programs, which will automatically take in the topographical data of the area and analyze it all. It just makes the process a lot easier. So you're going kind of back to those hand calculations for the exam, testing to make sure that you still understand the principles behind what you're doing once you're actually practicing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it was hard. It was hard. I didn't sleep. I was a nervous wreck. And, back then everything was hand graded. So you had to wait 6 weeks to get your results. It's awful.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a lot older than you think I am, Mario.
No, it's not that. It's the fact, let's be clear. I grew up with a dial-up as well. I grew up with not being able to print off everything as well. It's just funny to think about the conversations I'm gonna have with my kids where it's gonna be like, wow, you were so old. And it's like, no, stuff happened really fast. Technology updated very fast.
I know. And I try to explain that to my kids and they just don't get it.
All right. Well, now you're in your actual professional career. What you passed you passed your bar.
Yep.
You passed your bar exam. What was the next move?
So I passed my exam while I was working in state government.
Mm-hmm.
So there's really, if you think about engineering, civil engineering, the path that I took, there's two paths. There's a private consultant path where you can go work for a private consultant who's actually doing a lot of the design work, putting together plan sets, things like that. Or you can take a public service route, which is going to work for the government. You could work for the state highway department. You could work for your state water resource agency, any of the sewer planning districts, things like that. I chose to go into the government side, and I did that for a few different reasons. I have a lot of things that I like to do outside of work, so my time is very valuable to me. Mm-hmm. So I liked the set schedule of working within the government. And then I also was a mother at the same time. So being able to have that set schedule to achieve that work-life balance is really what led me onto the government side. And so for me, if we're being totally honest, having my professional engineer's license was a requirement. I want to have that background. I want to have that accreditation. I worked very hard for it. But I don't use my professional accreditation like somebody who's actually designing design sets would use theirs.
Okay. What was the immediate difference after you passed that test?
Pay raise.
Pay raise. What about the responsibilities?
Yep. So it's a big milestone that you reach. It's really once you become, you're not a student anymore. So even though you've been out of college, for a few years, you're still that new student graduate. Once you become a licensed engineer, you kind of have that clout under your belt. You've reached the next level in your engineering career.
What was the responsibility difference? Like what responsibilities did you take on?
Once I became a PE, I started signing things a lot more. So I started putting my actual name on a lot of design reports, things like that. At that point in my career, I was working for the state government. I was a bridge engineer. And so I did a lot of bridge inspections. So I don't know if you know that every bridge that you cross on a state highway system is inspected once every 2 years. And so I managed our inspection program and our maintenance program for 11 counties here in Northern Kentucky. And so at that point, once I had my license, I began signing all the reports I was writing and adding my name, taking liability for those reports.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
You mentioned you have the option of private sector.
Yep.
I feel like I know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyways. Is there a significant difference in the salary if you go private compared to public?
Tremendous. Yes. Yeah. There is a big salary difference. If you're looking at just your baseline yearly salary, yes, there's a huge difference. But if you look at an overall comprehensive benefits package, at the time, they kind of evened out. I would say that now that's not the case. But at the time, once you figured time off, you figured your pension, your health insurance, all of those things, it kind of evened out after about 10 or 15 years. I don't think that's the case anymore. So.
And for everyone that may not have caught on to which one was paying more, private sector paid more.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
What's the private sector doing differently than you are?
So when I started with the state government back at that time, there was still a full pension system. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the trade-off in my salary was to participate in that pension system. So that's a big difference. Health insurance rates were a lot better. So even though you're making a higher salary in the private sector, you're still having other expenses come up, saving for your retirement, you're paying higher health insurance, things like that. So that's really how it kind of evened out. Now that there are no more pension systems and health insurance is getting more costly for everybody, that gap between the two salaries is just getting wider and wider.
For clarity, when I say the difference, I'm actually asking what's the difference in the responsibilities and what are some of the example of organizations out there? Because I believe Terracon is an example. It's a major civil engineer company, correct?
Yeah, they're huge.
And that would be a private sector organization.
That would be a private sector. So if you go work in the private sector, you're going to have clients. Your client's likely going to be a private developer or a state agency. And you're doing work for that client. So you're solving their needs. You're doing what they need you to do. When you're on the government side, you're kind of establishing what it is that needs to be done. Does that make sense? So the consultant's out executing, the public sector side is out there kind of organizing, communicating, planning, budgeting, all of those things.
Okay. All right.
I don't know. Does that make sense?
It sounds like you're laying the groundwork for the actual private sector. Would that be accurate?
I didn't hear you.
I said it sounds like you're laying the groundwork for the private sector.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And the private sector is out there. They're doing the design. They're doing, like Terracon does a lot of soil testing. They're out there doing the soil testing. We're kind of just filtering the data on the public side and interpreting the data on the public side, figuring out how to pay for the work that the private sector has designed.
Exactly. Okay. All right. If you don't exist, they have a hard time making their things exist.
Yeah. We take all the tax dollars and figure out, where they need to go based on safety, rehabilitation needs, things like that. And then we give that money to the private sector to do the actual design and implementation. Okay.
For people to continue to have a full grasp of what you do, because you have a lot of responsibilities, and the civil engineers I've spoken with, you all do so many different things. I want people to truly gather what it actually looks like to be a civil engineer. So on a day-to-day, or let's not even make it a day, in a month time, what would have been some of the things that you would have had to do throughout that month?
Sure. Well, I've had a very diverse career. So do you want me to talk about what I'm doing right now, or do you want me to kind of give you an idea of what I've done throughout my career?
Oh, we're going to make a path through the career, but I want to talk about right now, let's just make sure people have a full understanding and have a vision of what civil engineering actually looks like.
Sure. So it's a little different for me right now. I'm in a management role. So a lot of what I do right now is personnel type issues. I have a staff that I manage. So I do a lot of that kind of work on a day-to-day basis now. Where I'm working at right now, we do a lot with local developers who are wanting to develop land where we live, whether it be a subdivision, whether it be, a local family farm that's getting split up into 3 properties. We work a lot with those developers.
For clarity, because everybody hears development, and I want to make sure that people who have never heard the term development, they understand. Development is essentially something getting added to the land that people are going to be able to enjoy and participate in, opposed to just, because for somebody who may never heard of hear land development and think, oh, they're going to cut the grass. It's landscaping.
No, I appreciate that. No, it is any sort of new infrastructure that's being built. So we see residential subdivisions, we see apartment complexes, retail facilities, any new piece of land that's having something built on it.
Okay.
Does that help?
Absolutely. I just want to make sure that's clear for
Yep.
everyone, because we throw around the term development because we're accustomed to it. But
Yes,
I know
I
that
know.
sometimes when you come in, you're like, wait, what's development? I don't get it.
Yeah. Yep. Nope. I appreciate that. So we have a book of regulations that we follow to make sure that any new development that's happening, any new infrastructure that's being built meets our standards. Anytime a developer is building out a new piece of property, whether it be a subdivision, sometimes retail, they're adding public infrastructure that a public agency is going to take over. So it could be your sewer connections, it could be stormwater runoff in the new parking lots, new roadways as part of your residential subdivision. So those are all coming through our office, making sure that it meets our guidelines. And then I have a staff of 5 construction inspectors who go out and are actually on site while these new developments are being built, making sure that they're being built per our standards.
Okay. All right. Now let's go ahead and take that path. We already graduated college. You're in your first role. You just got done passing your test, which allowed you to get that pay bump and get to sign some new papers. So what has your career been like?
My career has been a lot of ups and downs. So as with anything, it's kind of ebbed and flowed to what my life kind of dictates at the moment. So, early on in my career, I really took some time to think through what my priorities were. I knew that we were going to have a family, and I knew I wanted to be a very present parent. And so I kind of molded my career to be able to allow me to do that. That's a big reason I chose to go into government, I think, as I mentioned before. So starting off, when I was young and newly married, I started right with an engineering firm, just cranking out traffic design reports. So anytime a new development would be built, like we just described, I would go in and analyze the traffic that would be generated as part of that new development. So how many new cars would be attracted to the area because of that development. Then I would go and analyze the roadway system, analyze the traffic signals, make sure that the existing roadways could handle all that traffic. If it couldn't, I would then determine what sort of improvements were needed. I did that for a couple of years, and that was literally just cranking out report after report after report. When I left that role, we relocated to a different part of the country. That's when I went to work for the government here in the Cincinnati area. And that's really where I started to get a lot of hands-on experience and really start to grow in my career. My first role with the government was as a bridge engineer. As I mentioned, all of the bridges per the state law had to be inspected a certain amount of times. So I was actually out doing bridge inspections. I've climbed all the Ohio River bridges I've been to the top of. We would literally get an arm's length distance from all of the nuts or all the bolts and rivets along the bridge, make sure they weren't cracking, make sure that the paint system was holding up, all of those things. And so that was a very exciting job as a young person.
As a person who is not excited about potentially falling from heights, that's a way of saying being afraid of heights.
Yes.
Did you just say you were at the top of the bridge or
yes.
over the bridge? There's a difference between being on top of the bridge, because there's a flag at the top of the bridge. On the bridge is where the cars are.
Yes.
Did you know coming into this profession, you were going to be up there with the flag?
No, I had no idea.
Okay, I got you. All right. I'm just curious.
No clue. No clue. But when I was, looking for a job, this was the spot that they had open. And I thought, what the heck, I'll give it a shot, and I ended up loving it. It was fun. I overcame a lot of fear. Heights never bothered me. So it wasn't that big of a deal for me. I really enjoyed it. And to be able to be hands-on with engineering infrastructure that's already in place and being able to inspect it and see how it functions under real life conditions, I learned a tremendous amount from that job. I loved it. I loved it.
Okay.
But
Go ahead. You're talking about some of your experiences and where you were.
Yeah. In fact, we have a suspension bridge that runs downtown that connects Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that a lot of people don't know is that suspension bridge is actually on our list of historic landmarks for the civil engineering profession. So our National Society maintains a list of historic landmarks, and that bridge is one of our top landmarks. It was built as a prototype for the Brooklyn Bridge in New York. Nobody believed Mr. Roebling that you could span that distance the way that he did. So he came here to Cincinnati to prove that it could be done. And if my memory serves me correctly, he died. He got a case of the bends, which was quite common back then in construction. And he passed before the Roebling was done. His son went on to build the Brooklyn Bridge. Mm-hmm. So just a lot of history there, and just a lot of really, really, really great things that I learned in that role. Oh, but I did have my first son while I was in that role, and I kind of started to look at my life in different terms, and climbing to the top of bridges just wasn't that appealing to me anymore. So I made a switch then. Actually took some time off work for a few years, stayed home with him while he was a baby. My husband was relocated to Boston, Massachusetts. And so we knew we would be there for just a short time. So I enjoyed the time with my son then. When we came back is when I went to work in the private sector for a large manufacturing company.
For all the ladies out there, I have to ask the question, how was that? Like, how easy was it for you to have worked so hard to get where you were, and then to step back or completely step out of the role for a couple of years? I know it was great value time for your actual child and you and the bonding time, but I can only imagine potentially what might have went through your mind just wanting to be able to utilize all your education experiences.
It was very difficult. Yeah, it was very, very difficult. I think it was made easier by the fact that my husband was getting transferred for just a short period of time. We knew it was only going to be about a year to a year and a half. So it kind of put a shot clock on it. Mm-hmm. It would have taken me longer to get my professional license transferred to the state of Massachusetts than I would have had to work. And so it was kind of one of those unique situations where I didn't really have a choice at that point. Does that make sense?
It does.
So knowing I was going to go back to work, I think made it easier. I do love to work. I love my children. I love my family. But as you said, every person is different, and everybody feeds off different motivations. And for me, that's working. I love to work. So it was nice to have that time. I loved it. I wouldn't give it back for anything, but it did feel good to re-enter the workforce.
How does one stay sharp during that time so when they do re-enter the workforce, they don't lose a step?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I tried to stay up to date I did join our local organization where we moved of professional engineers. And so I tried to stay up to date with what they were doing through that society. A lot of times they'll have speakers come in and give presentations. Back then we did not have continuing education requirements. Now we do. Mm-hmm. So if you take that time off, you still have to continue to go to classes and keep your license up to date, things like that. So just trying to stay in touch with the community. It's a lot more difficult when you're in a part of the country where you don't know anybody, but just being proactive, getting out there, taking steps, trying to meet people is really the best way to do that.
Okay. So you were active and you were maintaining relationships, and people were most likely talking to you about what was going on, which kept you sharp, allowed you to at least live vicariously through others.
Yep. And I kept in touch with all of them. I knew we would be coming back to the area shortly. So I kept in touch with all of our colleagues, my colleagues that were back in the area as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
People love bridges. And I don't want to just not talk about that for a brief second. What are some of the cool things that people may not know about bridges?
What are some cool things that okay, here's one. If you're ever stuck in traffic on a bridge, and you might sometimes feel it bouncing, like you're in your car.
Makes me uncomfortable every time.
And you can feel it moving. So here's a fun tip. If you're ever in your car and you don't feel it moving at all, that's a problem. So you want to get off the bridge if you don't feel it moving. You want to feel that flexure. And sometimes it's so slight you don't feel it, but you want your bridge flexing and moving. It's designed to do that as part of its design. Once it's static and totally stiff and it doesn't allow for that flexure, then you start to see cracking in the beams. You start to see bolts breaking, things like that.
Is that what we see with, say, the viaduct as well as some of the bridges crossing over the river?
So the viaduct, I don't get over to Cincinnati too often, which is not a great thing, but the viaduct is just a concrete structure that is just deteriorated.
Yeah, badly.
So badly. And those maintenance programs are just so imperative especially when you have double decker structures like that and you have water runoff coming from one structure down to the next. So yeah, there's a multitude of issues there. But yeah, the Brent Spence is a great example. What a lot of people don't know is the Brent Spence carries 3% of our gross domestic profit as a nation every day, just in the amount of goods that it carries. So you start looking at the public infrastructure, and we saw it this last winter when there was the fire damage, how it can just bottleneck a whole region if you don't keep that infrastructure up to date. So they're a critical piece of our infrastructure.
Okay. Well, keep going. Let's continue past the when you just got back into the field, you had your child, you got to spend that valuable time, and now you're back in the city and you're doing what?
I decided to go into the private sector. So I went to work for a large manufacturing company here in Cincinnati. It's a global company, extremely successful, just an all-around wonderful place to work. I went as a civil engineer. At the time, I want to say there were maybe about 15 civil engineers in the company globally that were doing civil engineering work. Mm-hmm. A lot of what we did was contract management. So we had a lot of design consultants that worked for us. So again, similar to what I did with the government, kind of stating what the problem was, what we needed done, and then working with those private consultants to get the details figured out. That was a great job. I traveled a lot. I went around to our plants. I worked in laundry detergent, so I would go to a lot of our plants that made laundry products, doing a lot of civil engineering support. So anytime they were needing to build new tanks or they had new conveyor lines, all of those have structural supports. And so going and making sure all the groundwork is laid, all of the site stuff is ready for when all of the heavy manufacturing equipment comes in.
Based off of the way you broke it down, it became very obvious to me what company you're referring to. For that reason, I have to ask, without, of course, saying the name of the company, what made you go that route opposed to all the other potential options that you could have done inside of that company?
Well, working for the government, I had done a lot of contract administration. So I had not had my hands into the detailed design work that consultants do. So I knew at that point in my career, I didn't want to kind of start over doing that kind of work. I wanted to get back into the private sector, but I wanted to be in that leadership role. I wanted to be kind of in that direction setting role. And so that seemed like a good fit for me. My husband at the time worked for the same company. So it was a great opportunity for us to kind of meld our professional lives together. You know, we had a growing family, so it was a good way for us to kind of coordinate our schedules and you know, create another touch point for us as to be working together. So.
All right. Okay. So you worked in that industry, you were doing your thing, and why would you leave?
That's a great question. I get it a lot.
I know they have I heard a lot of stories about how phenomenal the retirement benefits are set up and just all different things. I know there's other things like certain departments getting sold off and things like that, but I've heard a lot of great things that it comes to it. I'm trying to stay vague so it doesn't become obvious.
No, it's fine. Yeah,
about
and
what company we're talking about.
And we're being totally transparent. People rarely leave there. So it was a very unusual thing for me to leave, especially after only 3 years. It was a great job and I loved it. And I felt like I was good at it. About a year before let me think here. About a year and a half before I left, I had twins. So I had identical twin boys. And when I left, they were babies. They were going to daycare from about 6:30 in the morning till 6 in the evening. At the same time, you know, I don't want to get into the details, but my older son was starting to have some issues in school. And so we just needed a parent at home for a little bit. So the kids' needs were kind of superseding my needs at that point. So I left and without a plan, really, just other than to get my kids back on track and kind of get us as a family reset, and then went from there. So I know that's not a really traditional answer, but it just kind of was a change that we needed to make as a family, to kind of get back on course with what our goals were as a family. So.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. What are these organizations that you participate in? Because frankly, to continue to stay sharp and take time off from your profession is frankly very impressive, as well as acknowledging the fact that it's not like you're taking steps back when you come back into your roles. It seems like you're either stepping into roles that are equal, some apparently better in that other role, in the previous role that we're just speaking about, and sometimes maybe even stepping up. So I'm just curious, what are these organizations that you're participating in so people can look into if there's somebody out there that may want to participate in themselves? What are these organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest, for my break from the manufacturing company, I didn't stay too active. I really focused my time at home. I got very involved with my kids' school, so I made a lot of contacts there. So much of what we do comes down to communication. I don't care what profession you're in. So much of what we do comes down to communication. And when you re-enter the workforce, it's not just communication about what you know, it's communication about yourself. You're marketing yourself. So how do you take your experiences that you've lived and kind of transform that into your career? How do you find the applicability to what you've done in your decision making and tie that back to your career and how that makes you an asset as an employee? And so that's really what I took a lot of my time doing while I was off was, staying focused on what my goal and what my priority at that time was. And I think when you're honest with people and you tell them, look, my priority right now is my family, they can appreciate that. And when they see you take steps to keep that priority, I think that just helps, communicate your dedication, your priority setting, your goal setting, things like that. I should also mention that when I did decide to re-enter the workforce, I went back into state government. So I went back to a place that already knew me, that already knew how I worked, that already knew what my work ethic was. So that made the transition a lot easier.
And it also sounds like it would be a lot easier to go to those other companies because it wasn't like you left those companies with any frustrations or anything like that. It was more like our family is leaving the state. And so that means I can't work here any longer. Now that I'm back and now that I'm really active, I want to come back and work for the organization. So didn't burn any bridges there, no pun intended.
It was a good one though.
I realized after I did it, when it was coming out, I was like, oh, that's perfect.
So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up because if we're being honest with each other, that is probably the single most thing that I'm most proud of in my career, is that for that period of time where my family needed me and my kids needed me, I was able to make it work. And that's not going to happen for everybody. Like I said, I had some unique needs at home with my kids. To be able to look back, when I retire and to say I was there when I needed to be there, that to me that's my goal. So, and that I'm happy that I was able to find a career that has allowed me to do that.
Yeah, that's definitely special because that's something that people always talk about is on your deathbed or just in those few last hours thinking about looking over your life. What are the things that you want to say that you were actually able to have done with your life? And did you cherish those moments that were needed? And it definitely sounds like you were able to capitalize on that and then come back and capitalize in your profession as well. Now we're back in the public sector.
We are, yes.
Were you doing something different than you did previously?
Yes, of course. It's always something different.
Okay.
Yeah, so I went back to state government and became what they refer to as a permit supervisor. So still an engineering role. But anytime anybody was wanting to connect to a state roadway, it would have to go through my office. So if we had a lot of Dollar Generals at the time, there were Dollar Generals going up all over Kentucky at the time. So I'll use that as an example. Anytime they built a new store, we would work with them to make sure that their driveway met our standards, that it was built to our standards. Any new large subdivisions coming in, anything like that. It was our responsibility in my department to make sure that everything was built to state standards so that when we took it on to maintain, we could maintain it properly. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Not terribly exciting, but I did kind of get the inside track on what was happening in my community. I knew about developments that were coming in before they were here. So it was kind of a fun way to feel more connected to the community. I did that for about 1.5 years, and then I moved out into one of our construction offices, and I ran one of our construction offices, which was here in Boone County. I don't if in the area. Boone County is in northern Kentucky, and it's a really booming part of northern Kentucky. A ton of development. The airport's located in Boone County. A lot of growth happening out there is leading to a lot of road construction to help facilitate that growth. And so I went out and managed our construction office in Boone County. And there I had a staff of about 15, from construction inspectors to an admin, a couple of admin folks in the office, and then also our maintenance department. So the road crew that went out and did all the maintenance work that fell under my umbrella as well. So that was a very interesting job as well. I was out on the ground, boots on the ground, out working in the construction sites. So that was a new experience, and probably one of my favorite roles that I had throughout my career.
So I met you when you were doing a job we have so many different airports in this area, so it doesn't matter. Yep. You were working at a airport in this area. And talk about that. That is very interesting, because having come from concrete restoration, I've seen the airports. I know some of the actual roads. There's roads obviously on the airports. There's the structure. There's so many different things that you potentially have your hands in. So I'm really curious to know exactly what it looked like to be inside of that area.
Yeah, that was a great opportunity. So that opportunity came up at one of our local airports, and I jumped on it. It is still considered part of the public sector. We're providing a transportation service to the community. From a civil engineering perspective, it's an incredible opportunity. It is it's a city in itself. You have your own transportation network. You have an airfield that is just massive. The amount of pavement that was at our airport, just a little fun fact, was the same amount of pavement in the entire county had in which the airport was located. So just a tremendous amount of infrastructure kind of condensed into one area. Mm-hmm. I loved it. I had been working in asphalt and concrete for a long time, and so to be able to jump into this more specialized sector was a great opportunity for me. And here's a fun fact that I bet you didn't know. The airport that I worked at was a huge cargo airport. We did a ton of cargo traffic. A 747, which is one of the largest air carriers, when it takes off from that runway, it looks like it's just floating in the air. That 747 usually weighs over 800,000 pounds fully loaded. And it just lifts off the ground like a feather. It's just, it never got old standing out there and watching those aircraft take off. I loved being part of that.
That probably was amazing, just to be up close. Yeah. Well, not too close, but close enough in person to see it.
Yeah.
I'm curious because I've been on a runway. There's lines on the runway. Is that for the water? So there is no hydroplaning? What's the deal with it not being a completely flat surface?
That's a great question. So you're talking about the little groove lines that are in there?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're exactly right. That is for water. So the runway is sloped at what we call a crown. So its high point is in the middle, and then it grades off just very slightly for water runoff. But then, because the friction in an aircraft, the friction between the tire and the pavement is so important, not only for landing, but for takeoff, we put those grooves in the runway as well, just to catch any of that additional water and drain it off the pavement. So yeah, it's a great observation. Not many people would know that. It's me. See, you should have been an engineer.
Yeah, I appreciate the thought. Only thing about engineering I want to do is to be an inventor. That's the only aspect that I'm really passionate about. And one day I'll figure out a way to get that to happen.
Yeah.
Is there anything else significant about the concrete, though? Because, you mentioned how heavy these planes are. So is there anything else significant about the actual ground in which the planes are landing and taking off on? There's ice and snow and salt and so much stuff that's happening. And then it's just the sheer weight of what could be happening to slab on grade. I'm just curious to know, Is there anything else And 7 grade for anybody, it's nothing under. It's just the ground.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, your typical pavement for a runway is so much more complex than for a roadway. So the longest runway at the airport that I worked at was 12,000 feet. So over 2 miles long. The runway itself was 150 feet in width. But the way that it was composed is what makes it really unique. So I don't remember the exact number, but starting from the bottom up, I want to say it was about 10 inches of rock. Sitting on top of the rock was 18 inches of concrete, which is extremely thick.
Wow.
Your typical streets, maybe 7 inches. So 18 inches of concrete. On top of that was 8 inches of asphalt. So just a tremendous pavement section that you're looking at to take that weight. And what a lot of people don't realize is that weight is really from that initial, so there's the weight of the aircraft rolling to take off. So it starts at a stop and then it rolls very slowly to its final speed to take off. So you have tremendous weights on the pavement while it's taking off. But the impact from the landing is also very significant. When the aircraft comes in and the tires are under extreme amount of pressure, when those pressurized tires hit that pavement for the first time, that's also a very heavy loading for the pavement. So it was very interesting, very different than doing roadways, a lot safer, which I liked, a lot safer than being around, open traffic. But it was a great position. I did project management there. So managed a lot of our construction projects, any sort of pavement projects out on the airfield. I had full driving privileges. So I could drive down the runways. I could drive down the taxiways. I was talking to the FAA tower. I learned a lot at that job. It was a really, really great job.
I'm sure you never did this because it would be inappropriate, but I have to say what looks so much fun is to be able to get out there like you're in a race car and just floor it and just get around there. And
no,
just
I never did
so
that.
Much fun. Yeah, I know you've never
did that.
Yeah, I don't think there probably was enough time for you to pull it off, but nonetheless, it just seems like it would be such a fun activity. And I will say that is so freaking amazing. I never even thought about how thick it was. Like I stood on the concrete, but I didn't actually think, and that wasn't asphalt that I was standing on, it was actually concrete. But when I was looking down on, I never even thought how thick it was compared to the regular road. And I absolutely, I kind of wish I didn't know, if I'm honest, Richard, ever think about the pressure. As soon as you were talking about it, I was like, oh my God, the landing. I've always thought about just the plane being under control landing. I never thought about the ground being able to take the weight of the plane coming in at such a fast pace and then slowing down and bracing. I couldn't even, that's it's interesting. Okay.
And that's the lead, flying is so safe. It is the safest mode of transportation that there is when you start looking at safety statistics and the amount of just oversight that goes into the pavements, making sure that they're kept up to date, that they're in good shape, that there's no deterioration. It's incredible the amount of planning that goes into that line of work to just make sure everything stays in good condition. It is a well-oiled machine, that's for sure.
Okay. And I've had a pilot on, so they talked about their experiences. And they actually kind of alleviated some of the stress that came with flying on planes for me. So I definitely will give him credit for that. All right. So now
you want to experience something scary. I went up with my 15-year-old son, is an aspiring pilot, and I went up with him for his first flight lesson, and the instructor let him take off the aircraft. And I thought I was going to die sitting in the back seat. I was so nervous. I've been around airplanes for so long, but up in that airplane with him, he did a great job, but boy, the mom and me came out.
I understand. I'm not even Catholic, and I would be in the back. 1 Hail Mary, 2 Hail Mary, 3 Hail Mary. 4. Well, the next role is the current role, correct?
So the job came up at my current employer, and it was just a great opportunity. We have a new executive director in place who has a great vision for the organization. She's a great leader. And kind of at that point in my career, I know I've talked about my kids a lot, but they're older. They are going down great paths. So I'm ready to step more into those leadership roles. I'm ready to really dive back into my career and start taking on more the direction setting kind of role. And so that's what this position has really done for me, stepping into the director's role, able to work with the executive director on setting the vision for our organization, how we want to serve the community, how we want to gauge our metrics for how we're going to serve the community, and really lead a staff. I have a great staff where I'm at. They are so knowledgeable, so just so good at their jobs. Very happy to be where I'm at right now.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get into the conversation about money, which means we're going to have to take a lot of steps back.
Yes.
Well, actually, we talked about 10. You got paid $10 an hour in your first internship. So the first job that you had straight out of college, in which before you were certified and became a PE, what's that entry level salary? I know this was some odd years back, and if you want to say what the actual general salaries of that is now, that can work as well.
Sure. So I started off in the private sector. This was back in the early 2000s. In the I'm going to say 45 to 49,000 a year range.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that has significantly gone up as it would with any career.
And you mentioned after you got your PE, after you became a PE, there was an increase, a significant increase. So what did that look like?
So it's not so much a number for numbers game, because I did step out of the private sector and go into government. So I would say that it equated to probably about a 15% raise when all was said and done once I got my PE license.
And that actually means what out loud?
From a dollar standpoint?
Yes.
I would say, now I'm having to do quick math in my head, about $8,000.
Figured it wasn't that hard. You said you loved it and you figured out. I didn't want to have to do the brain work. I'll let you go ahead and do that.
Probably about $8,000.
Okay, and you said it's gone up significantly since then. What's the general entry level salary for a person going into that role now?
Oh, I was talking about my salary for my career. So
okay.
Never mind.
But
I would say for somebody that's entering with a master's degree or even a bachelor's degree, I would guess it's in the low 50s.
Okay, that's not bad at all for a person fresh out of school, no kids, and living life. Yeah, that sounds pretty comfortable.
And that's for the private sector.
Okay, well, that's private.
Yes, yeah. For government, you're not. I'd say the government is still behind in their salaries, and they're not progressing very well in keeping up. It's a problem for engineers in our community right now. I'd say coming out of college and going to work in the government, you're in the low 40s.
Okay. All right. Well, I can't poo-hoo that. I started off in the 30s.
Absolutely.
30s, at 30. At 30. Let's change that. Make sure it's clear. All right. I felt every piece of it too. Every less of it. So the next row, you started moving along, and what's the next? Let's talk titles with the actual salary. So you just got that bump, and you got the extra $8,000 added on there. You're in the 50s. So what's the next role, and what's that title and salary?
Okay, so then after I got my PE, I took some time off with my kids, remember, and then I came back and went to work for the large manufacturing company. And there I almost doubled my salary. So if you're willing to, and I came in entry level. And so if you're willing to go work in one of the large manufacturing facilities like that, you can come out of college starting in the high 70s to mid 80s.
Wow. That's what I would expect at that location. That makes complete sense. And you said that's entry level. Yes.
Even though I came in as an experienced hire, they had the mindset that even if you're an experienced hire, you came in starting off with everybody else. So, and I was, I had no issue with that. So
I can imagine. Fine. I took 2 years off and I came back and doubled my salary. No problem. No problem. What is just based off of the fact that if you would have stayed at that company, you could have made a significant amount of money. So I just want to, while we're here, what was the potential trajectory financially at that company?
So I can go off of what it was, given to me. I think, the typical raises were, 4 to 5% a year. And then once you get to a certain level, you start to get stock stock options, things like that, I think I would easily be in the 130s to 140s had I stayed there.
At this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And that would have been what, 7-8 years ago?
No, that would have been about 10 to 12 years ago now.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
So next job.
Yeah, next job, staying here with my kids. And then I went back into state government. And I will say that when I went back into state government, I took a significant pay hit. But while I was there, I was able to bring it quite a bit up. So I left state government in the 75 to 80 range. Okay. So not too far off.
All right. Yeah. So you were still, it sounds like you only took like maybe $10,000 setback. Yep.
So not bad at all. When I moved over to the airport, about the same salary range, little quicker progression.
Okay.
And then where I'm at now, similar type of range is what you would expect for the amount of time that's gone by. So
what's the highest role that a civil engineer can acquire?
Oh my gosh, that could be anything. There are these huge engineering companies out there that have hundreds of offices across the globe. I mean, you could aspire to be the president of one of those companies. In
like
state
what?
government.
Let's name some. I mean, you don't work there, so we can name those.
Yeah, AECOM is a huge one. They're a huge engineering firm that has offices globally. There's AECOM. There's local companies that I work with, like small family-owned companies. Of course, I'm drawing a blank now that I'm being put on the spot, but there's companies all over Cincinnati that do work for these large organizations that just, offices everywhere. So.
Okay. All right. Well, we're getting to a point where I love to play this game that is called Rapid Questions. I just started adding this over the last 4, 5, 6, 7 interviews.
Okay.
And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's rapid questions. You don't have to overthink it. And just give me a simple, concise answer. All right.
Okay. Yep.
I always start with the softball, which is an ironic use of words. What's your favorite sport?
Oh my gosh, golf.
Okay.
Yep.
Favorite book?
My favorite book. Oh my gosh, my favorite book. Gosh, I'm not a big reader. Remember I said early on, I'm not a very big reader. I will say that one of my favorite books when I was a kid was The Joy Luck Club. I love that book, Joy Luck Club.
Okay. Favorite hobby?
I love to knit and crochet. Grandma.
Okay. Well, it's a useful skill.
It is. I make things. I'm an engineer. I make things.
If you could speak to anyone, dead or alive, not related to you, who would it be?
Related to me. Dead or alive and not related to me. I would talk to one of our most famous engineers, civil engineers in the region, which I talked about earlier, was John Roebling. I think I would talk to John Roebling.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would be and I know you love your job, so we're not talking about companies, we're just talking about positions. What would be the dream position for you?
Dream position for me would be to go back to where I started, which was one of our state organizations, and lead that organization. That would be my dream job.
President,
no, I think it would be Secretary of Transportation is the title.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear about it.
Yeah,
okay.
Like president, yes.
All right.
Yeah, that would be my dream job. So maybe in 10 years we'll be sitting down.
This question for some reason seems to be tough, so I'm gonna give you 3 outs, okay?
Okay.
Because I didn't think this was gonna be hard for people to answer, but so the first out is what song matches this phase of life? And mind you, we talking about, let's just keep it neutral and comfortable, and we don't have to go too deep into it. What song, what album, or the third out, and I'm trying to add one today to make it easy on you, is what would be your theme song? Which is the exact same question I asked.
What would be my theme song? It is that song by Katy Perry called Roar.
Okay, nice, nice.
Yes, it would be Katy Perry, Roar. I've been through some things in my life. My life has taken some twists and turns. So I have listened to that song many times. So that would be my song. Very proud of where I'm at right now.
Okay, good song. What is the change you want to see in the world?
What is the change that I would love to see and this is going to be so generic, but I would love to see everybody just have empathy for each other. I would love a world where everybody can look at their neighbor and put themselves in their neighbor's shoes.
Mm-hmm.
I would love that.
It's really intriguing. That is like probably the number one answer. I don't think I've gotten anything outside of that answer yet, which is really interesting. Go ahead.
Sorry. I know this is the quick round. I think that's such an important, you're interviewing people that are leaders in their industry. And to me, empathy is just such a key characteristic that as leaders, we need to be able to have. So
what's your why?
What's my why is my kids, always 100%. So just being able to provide for them, give them the life that they want, but also be able to be there and encourage them and let them know that they can do whatever it is they want. And so it's not only being there, but it's setting that example for them too, that, you can put your mind to anything. You can set your goals and priorities and, you can be smart and creative and find a way to make it work.
Okay. The hard smile you see in my face is because you said the title of it, and there's a reason it's a ... is because you can set your mind to anything, but the catch is that's nothing. You have to set your mind to literally something, a title here. And I love that the fact that you mentioned I'm being an example. So you can be anything, but more importantly, I'm giving you an example of something that you can be.
Yep.
And I definitely expected you to say your kids, because when you were talking earlier, I heard you get choked up. And so I knew that was going to be the answer. I just wanted to go ahead and lay it out there for you to actually say.
No, and I appreciate that. Yep. 100%.
Absolutely. So I have probably one more question. I said probably on purpose. There is the question I started off with, which was New York. What happened? And why did you mentioned outside of your job, it pretty much exploded. So what's going on there?
You know what? I don't know anything about what happened in New York. I guess I haven't been watching the news. Is it recently?
I think it's within a week or two. In some parts of New York, it was pretty much a flood. So how does a sewer fill up so quick? And I can understand when things get stopped up and it's blocking the drain, but how is a sewer system, especially in the Cincinnati area, that's most likely running out into a river, overflowing?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. And we saw today, when rain just comes down so fast, you design these systems to 100-year flood, which basically just kind of dictates the frequency that the rainfall is coming down. But we all know that sometimes it can exceed those design volumes. You can't design to the worst case every time. So without knowing, exactly what's happened, systems can just become overrun. They can be designed for one sort of set of numbers, but Mother Nature might have something else in mind. The important thing too to consider is a lot of our infrastructure underground is aging at this point. And so you look at the time frame for which that system was put in, it probably makes sense that now's about the time that you're going to start to see more failures. And you can't see those failures happening because they're underground. So you don't know until something catastrophic like this happens.
So for clarity, it sounds like it was taking on water faster than it was built to do so. Like once the water caught up with it and it slowed down, it was able to operate as normal, but it just was taking on too much water too fast and it just couldn't handle it.
And water always finds the path of least resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's gonna seep out of any little crack or any little hole that it can and make its way somewhere else. So
okay. and I said, I hope there was the last question, but I got so excited and I had to hold composure because when we started talking about underground and we are in Cincinnati, it did trigger that thought of, do you have any facts or history or information that you can share about the secret underground train subway that was supposed to happen that never happened in Cincinnati, and even the structure that's still there?
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's all masonry structure, so it's all brick construction, if I'm not mistaken. Just an incredible amount of work that went into that system. It was supposed to be like a commuter rail system for within the city. You know, it's funny you bring that up because I used to know the story and I don't anymore, and I don't want to give you the wrong facts. But something happened in the funding for the system right before it was about to go into service that just pulled the entire project. For a while, they were doing tours. Do they still do tours?
That's what I knew about, and I have not looked into it, but since it's summer, I'm probably going to check that out because I've always been curious and interested in it. Do you at least know if they decided one day, all right, we have, I know that the train here already was a conversation or whatever it's called that goes around the city.
Yeah.
Ooh, that probably
I don't know.
almost $500 million almost probably to build a subway here in
Cincinnati. I have no idea. If I'm not mistaken, it was around the same time that the interstate system was being built. Maybe it was sooner. So I don't know if other modes of transportation just picked up and there wasn't the need anymore. I don't know. No, but I will tell you one interesting engineering fact about Cincinnati. If you're familiar with Mount Adams and kind of the east side of Cincinnati, that entire hillside is held up by these cable stayed structures that you can see them from the interstate. You can see the caps to them from the interstate. Those are all tensioned cables anchored into the rock below Mount Adams, and that's what holds that hillside up. It's incredible.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yep. So next time you're driving by there, you can look and see. And again, I'm not an expert on any of what's happened over there, but you can actually see the ends of the cables on the side of the wall.
All right. Well, I don't have any more questions, but I do have 2 requests.
Yeah.
First request is for you to let us know what it is that you would tell the younger version of yourself that would allow you to get to success faster.
So I would tell the younger version of myself to don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. You belong at the table. You belong to have a seat at the table, and just go for it. Be confident in yourself, make a decision, create your path, and just go out there and do it.
You're going to make me ask a question, aren't you? Okay.
What's that?
It sounds like you had a little bit of imposter syndrome that was at least there.
I did. Yes.
And the question is, how did you overcome it? I can't just let you say that and not have you answer it and address it.
Oh, I, for being totally honest with each other, Mario, I still struggle with it daily. I mean, so it's a constant reaffirmation, like, hey, I can do this, and I think at some point, you get to the point in your career where it just comes naturally, but I think it's totally normal to have some of that self-coaching going on, especially as you're making changes in your career, right? So especially as you're moving through positions, don't be afraid to take risks. Everybody starts off somewhere. Everybody's made mistakes, just be yourself and get out there and do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, what would be the last, oh, you're fine. When it comes to things we talked about a whole lot today. There may be something that we didn't actually discuss. So I'm just curious, do you have any takeaways, anything that you want to share with the audience that we didn't get to speak about?
I would just really, what I really love about this program that you're doing is you're reaching out to young kids that are thinking about their career. Really take some time to think about what you love to do and how do you take what it is that you love to do and turn that into your career.
Okay. Well, my takeaway is, frankly, you have to take out. You mentioned that. Hit mute. Hit mute.
I have a St. Bernard who sees somebody outside.
You're good. Okay. So my takeaway is take action. I listened to what you were talking about earlier, and a part of taking action was you decided that you were going to switch degrees, and you didn't just decide and go and hope you're going to find an answer and just explore alone. You actually reached out to resources. Find the resources that you have. Just like we're trying to do with this, success leaves clues. And frankly, you found out those people who had the clues and explore whether or not you want to actually pursue the actual treasure at the end of it. And I definitely appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that, frankly, you're an engineer. And what many people don't often recognize, in people who actually become engineers and are surrounded by engineers do recognize this, engineers aren't necessarily the most, they don't have the greatest interpersonal skills at times. And so you having, you're muted, by the way, you being a person who actually engages people well and actually knows how to go into this conversation and have a conversation without it becoming awkward at a certain point is definitely an amazing skill that is necessary, because as you mentioned, you have to be able to communicate with so many different levels in the construction process to make sure that it actually goes correctly. And you also need to maintain relationships. The other thing is, know what you value. Like, I really appreciated that. I know that you were stepping back for family, but nonetheless, is knowing what you value allows you to be able to enjoy what you do, and also, frankly, remember why you're here. And yeah, we're here for our jobs and whatnot, but we're here to live. We're here for our families. We're here for our wives, and we're here to make the difference that we want to see. And if we know our values, we're able to actually follow through with that. So I really appreciate that shining through in your message, in your story. And I want to say thank you again, Laura, for your time today.
Thank you, Mario. I've really enjoyed this, and I really enjoyed getting to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time, so hopefully it won't be this long until next time.
Agreed. And like that, guys, you know how it goes. 2 of these. Woo! Okay, so
All right.
no. So absolutely, I'm hoping, I haven't heard anybody